Everyone, welcome to episode number 7 of the Live Free and Diet Hard podcast. And I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Eventually I'll stop sort of saying this sort of thing, but it still hasn't quite gotten comfortable, with the new name and not having my buddy Dean Guido as a co-host. So by now everybody knows, or if they've been paying attention, his wife is going to have a baby, and so life is changing for him. So he's left the keys of the kingdom to me, and but I'm still keeping on with talking to my industry friends and industry leaders and great people that I hope will enrich your career and life with their ideas. So I've got Tony Gentilcore on with me today. Tony's back. And this is actually one of the best parts about doing this weekly podcast is, I get to keep going and spend time with people, like I said, who've become really good industry friends of mine, who've been major influences on my career. And Tony's been a key one at that. I learned a lot of technical skills, my training early on in my career, reading a lot of Tony's work. And he's not just a technical influence, but a professional influence as well in terms of the way Tony handles himself with his social media, how he interacts with people. And I think that stuff actually matters a lot more than just learning how to do a squat or a deadlift properly, which Tony does lots of deadlifting. So like I said, I've been reading Tony's work for literally the last decade. Next month is my 10-year anniversary of starting as a trainer, which is kind of exciting. And, but most of all, I'm just really excited to have you back. So it's great to talk to you.
Yes, it's always a pleasure to catch up and touch base. And I think you might be, of all the workshops that I've presented at, you're definitely top 5 biggest dues that have attended. So that's an honor for you to have. Chris Duffin's probably number 1. Sorry.
Wrong motherfucker too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, but no, likewise, I always appreciate your friendship and certainly professionalism in the industry as well. I think you practice what you preach, and but yeah, high praise on your end. Thank you very much for that.
Oh, it's well deserved. I mean, again, like when I sat down and I had a list of people, all right, I have a few hundred people I can, talk to with rebranding. I want to bring a lot of people back. It's like, all right, well, here's kind of this, like 10 or 15 people are absolute must-haves right out the gates, right? I got Mike Gizertel, and we let off with Sohee Lee, and actually just got to interact with Matthew Ibrahim, who's become a really fast friend.
Matt's a good dude, yeah. Good dude, yep.
Unbelievable. He came alive on this podcast. I'm like, this guy is cool. So that we collaborated on a Teen Nation article and just been chatting a whole bunch. So really, really great dude. And that's one of the benefits of doing this stuff too. And anybody listening, I mean, like, not everybody needs to have a fucking podcast. Like, seriously.
Well, it was funny you brought that up, because I did a podcast last week and they were asking me like, hey, why don't you ever start a podcast? And I'm like, well, fuck no, I don't have the time to do it. But I also was like, I get invited on like 1 or 2 a month. So it's like, I kind of have one. Like, so yeah, I mean, but yeah, it seems like everyone, especially of late, have been starting one, but it's rare that they're actually good. So again, a testament to you. Like,
it does take something to stand out. Listened to the Fitcast for several years.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard you talk on there at least a few times because you're pals with Kevin, and then
yep.
Daniel Lennon's Sigma Nutrition Radio is really good. You've been on that too, haven't you? I'm sure.
I do not think I have. That is one that I have not been on.
I swear you have.
Maybe. Well, you know what? I'm so lost. Like, once you have a kid, Andrew, like you forget everything. Like I forget what I did last week. So
maybe I put you at the lunch here, but like I swear that you actually did an episode, because I mean his is a nutrition thing. But
you know what? I wouldn't doubt it, because I know there was one point I shared a pretty viral article that he wrote on Diet Coke. And why people were just going batshit crazy about, oh, it's going to ruin your stomach. And he's like, no, like, it's fine. And I think when I did that, we had connected. So I think you're right. I think back in like, I don't know, 2015, 2016, that range, I might've gotten on there. Yeah.
So I paid attention to some of the really great ones, and there's so much out there and it's hard to keep up with everything. Got a lot of great friends who have podcasts, but I also really love Luca Hocevar's Bigger Life podcast. That's
sure.
I find Luca really lights me up, and I find him really motivating. So having that in your space, once a week.
Well, he's the fitness industry's version of the world's most interesting man, I feel.
Ex-gangster, professional player,
so,
gym owner.
Yeah. I mean, he's a different breed
Keep
for
up
sure.
with it, but I find it motivating. So, I mean, I don't think everybody needs to subscribe to the Gary Vaynerchuk, a grind porn mentality, right? Nonstop hustle. I think that can be very unhealthy. But if your mind works that way, and mine tends to a bit, having people like him or Mark Fisher in your head can be really, really valuable.
Yeah. And, I think then you have those like myself who are a little bit more laid back. I would consider myself a little bit more laid back compared to
Okay.
Mark and Luca. I mean, they're both laid back dudes. Don't get me wrong. They're not always like that, but it's nice to have people like myself to bring you back to the middle. So you don't feel like you have to grind and hustle too much. I mean, it's always going to be hard work involved, but it's nice to enjoy other attributes of life too.
Well, I mean, you are a prolific writer. Have been
Sure.
until
Not of late, man. I was kind of calling myself out earlier today. I was like, of late, I mean, since COVID, I don't feel like I've been doing much of anything. There's just other things have been taking on my mental makeup, for lack of a better term. But I mean, yeah, I'm still getting content out there, but I don't feel like I'm writing of stuff that's like a lot of substance. I feel like I'm kind of regurgitating and repurposing old stuff, which is not a bad thing to do. I mean, there's stuff I've written, I've been writing for a while. There's stuff I've written 8, 9, 10 years ago that I can go back and kind of spice it up a little bit. Doing a little bit more of that.
well, I mean, I'm going to jump around to the order that I plan some of these things, but you've done a really great job over the years of hammering fundamentals. I mean, deadlifting, you're very
Sure.
known for deadlifting. And you get a lot of coaches in the industry who are very caught up in, well, shit, I've got to innovate. I've got to something different, whatever. Now, you also recently did a series of stuff with Megan Calloway, and Megan is
Mm-hmm.
very creative. She's in a unique niche, and her brand is growing, and she knows what she's doing. Whereas I feel like a lot of people are fumbling randomly with everything. So, I suppose, what are your thoughts about why you've always been rooted in the fundamentals, though
Uh,
step out into creative stuff sometimes?
Part of it's just it's kind of a fruitless endeavor to even try to emulate people like Megan, uh, or even Lee Boyce. I mean, Ben Bruno to a lot of degree. People who just come up with exercises that are like, I look at it and it makes sense. That's the important thing. Because there are some coaches and trainers or influencers, which I hate that term, but out there that are putting stuff up that I watch, and I'm like, okay, like, cool, but that takes probably 10 minutes to set up. And what is the application here? Like, I could just do this exercise, and that takes 2 seconds to set up, and I'm getting the same kind of concept. So there's the thing about Megan and Lee and like they're very innovative thinkers and outside the box thinkers, but their stuff makes sense. And there are many times where I look at something they put up or write about, and I'm like, man, like that is a completely obvious thing that I should have thought about that I didn't. And that's just that's my brain. Like I've been surrounded by individuals my entire career who are kind of the antithesis of me in terms of just how they function. Like, I mean, I've been best friends with Eric for decade or 2 decades now. Former business partner. Like, I lived with him for 2 years. Being around him was I was able to absorb a lot of his. I wouldn't say I was like copying him, but I saw his work ethic, of course, and I was like, whoa, I need to step up my game. I've joked about it many times where I think there was when he was writing, I forget if it was, I think when he was writing Maximal Training or Maximal Strength, his first book,
Yeah.
he was writing that while we were living together in his room, while I was out in the living room watching like Lord of the Rings for the 17th time. It was on a Friday night. So just
Legendary for his productivity when it comes to writing.
Oh yeah. I mean, he was somebody early in his career. Like, I think he had his first article published on T Nation at 22, which doesn't happen I don't think it happens nowadays that someone that young gets published on a site like that.
Kind of younger on there. I was just listening to a podcast. John Romanello appeared on another one, and John actually was talking about how I think he was like 20 or 21 when he got on there. And I'm like,
yeah,
I was 30. No, I was 40 when I got first published on there, right? It's like, geez, I started in the industry at 32, so I'm a late starter in that sense.
Yeah, and but going back to your original question, like in terms of keeping stuff simple, I don't feel the need that I need to kind of be show-offy, or I'm a firm believer that if you, in the strength and conditioning realm particularly, keeping things simple is kind of what works and what most people need to be focused on anyway. To me, it's if you're able to understand, certainly you got to understand anatomy and functional anatomy and how stuff connects, of course. And I wouldn't even say like I'm like the bee's knees on that front. Like I get by, but in terms of like looking and coaching somebody up on deadlift technique or squat technique to be able to regress and progress and maneuver people and understand like what's going to be a better fit for them, and even assessing it, like what is going to be the right variation for them, where is the bar going to go, where are they feet going to go, where should they stand. I if you're doing that as a coach and trainer, you already have a step up on 90% of your colleagues. I think there's really no need to get too cute. And a lot of that, I mean, sure, a lot of that stuff gets likes and follows, but if you're looking to make that a business, I mean, it's not going to work long term. I do feel those who keep it more simple tend to have a little more lasting power or more skin in the game when it comes to industry growth and career growth.
Well, it's funny because I think you're being a touch humble, because it's certainly amongst trainers who really care to dive into the evidence-based community and learn from the people we know are well respected in our space. You are one of the foundational teachers of a lot of the basic fundamental stuff, and you're a great communicator at taking the technical aspects of it and the basics and writing it and presenting it in a form that is really accessible to, an entire generation of coaches. I mean, certainly it's been going on since I started in the industry. And so, even the people coming up today are still seeing that. So there's a lot to be said for the skill of taking all that information and distilling it down into a really accessible, engaging form.
So maybe in hindsight, that is my superpower. Because you are right. Like I do think a lot of that comes via experience. Like I've been coaching since 2002, so I think a lot of that's just via experience and coaching. I don't even know how many people I've coached in my career. A lot. So there's that. But then practicing what I preach, like I think that comes into play. And I don't write about stuff that I don't do myself, in terms of an exercise variation or even like a program. Like I've kind of tested everything that I write about, which I think is important as well. But yeah, like I do think a skill set of being able to take a complicated thing like squat technique, which there's a lot of nuances to teaching a good squat, and simplifying it and just keeping it and just understanding that each person is different. Like I've never approached, I mean, maybe early in my career did, but I've never approached that thing per se, like squat technique. Instead, like, yeah, everyone has to squat this way. If they don't do it this way, then they're wrong and they're an idiot and like it's my way or the highway. I don't like that approach at all. When I see other coaches and fitness professionals take that tone, I just lose a lot of respect for that, because I understand that everyone's a little bit different, in terms of their stance and what's comfortable, and not to mention their goals. Yeah, the simpler the better is my mantra. If there's anything to learn from.
I agree on the squats. I mean, I actually need to dive into it, but Christian Thibodeau just put something up on T Nation about. It was an article sort of in favor of not necessarily always squatting deep. I just put up a post now. I'm 6'2", so I'm tall, but I squat my glutes to heels, and so I put up a video of me just squatting the other day, and I've been mostly doing single leg work. I'm going to come back to that in a second, and your video, but I clearly said I squat deep because I have the ability to
Sure.
use it as a governor on the load that I use. I do think a lot of people squat shallow to varying degrees when they have the capacity to move in a deeper range of motion, which we know is safe if your injuries or your individual body allows for that movement, as a way just to quote ego lift. And I guard against that because I don't think that's necessarily all that helpful. But yeah, you can vary. I mean, Dean Somerset's wife, Lindsay, she can't squat to parallel due to a history of injuries. And Dean's posted video of her before squatting, and occasionally someone will come in and complain or whatever. But I mean, you and Dean know as much about hip and squat anatomy as anybody. And no, there's no one size fits all for it. So again, like you said, anybody who comes in stating that, oh, there's one singular way to do it and that's it, everything else is wrong. I don't like superlatives in language and fitness anyway. So, approach the person who makes such claims with a little bit of caution and see what else they're about. And, don't run screaming. They may have some other great stuff. Kelly Starrett,
Sure.
Supple Leopard, he makes a very clear statement about how like feet need to be straight or within 5 degrees of straight. And it's like, well, I know that's not correct, but Kelly's full of all their really great information. It's actually otherwise a really great book.
Agreed.
The book.
Agreed.
Because there's just one detail that I'm like, no. Right? Now I was going to say,
Yeah.
you talk
Yeah.
about.
I'm interested about this video. The single leg stuff.
Yeah. So me and Luca Hocevar very separately have been posting stuff about supported or Hatfield Bulgarian squat.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah.
So I have a T-Nation article up about it a while back, and then I see Luca's doing them. He's holding the rails a little different than I was. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm gonna try that. So anyway, we've been posting this stuff, and then other people have been jumping on and trying it and realizing, okay, this is hard, but you can move more weight than you thought. So you pop up, you're recovering from a torn Achilles.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, motherfucker,
what's up, Andrew?
good leg. And what is it, like 300 pounds for a set of?
Yeah, I was like, I saw your video, and it just so happened that I was on one of my lower body days, and this might have been, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think. Yeah. So I wasn't quite I think I just started doing a bilateral deadlift at that point because I was still on my boot, I think, at that point. I've technically been out of my boot for full on for the past 2 weeks. But at that point, I saw your video, and this whole time since my Achilles injury, I've kind of leaned into this idea of the trainable menu and kind of proven to people that you can train around pretty much any injury. So let's find your trainable menu. So this whole time during my Achilles rehab, that's kind of what I've been showcasing with my training. So I injured my right side, so my left side was good to go. And when I saw your video, I was like, you know what? I bet I can do 300 pounds on that. So I did. I think I did it for 5. I was going to try to go for 10, but I didn't want to push my luck. But
it's wild
yeah,
how you can load, especially if you're trained and strong, because you add a lot of stability. If you look at it, the position that your hands are in, people think, oh, you're pushing with your arms. You're not getting any push out of the hole in that position.
Not the whole time. I mean, of course, you're taking balance out of the equation, which I'm fine with. Really, my objective was I just want to make sure my legs don't get small. So I could give 2 shits about my balance at that point. And yeah, I mean, you are getting a little bit, tiny bit of help, of course, but not as much as people think. And I wasn't like I was like pulling down on the pegs. I was just kind of like using it as like a balance point. But yeah, I won't lie. I was kind of surprised on what I could actually do. And seeing your video, what was the impetus of that? I was just like, you know what? Like, I'm gonna see if I can get to 300 on this. And it was a nice little, add a little spice to my workout that day. Because as you know, when you're rehabbing, it's not the most exciting thing in the world. So that was, and then I saw Luca do it. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. We're just, all just kind of getting a little competition in there.
Well, it's not even fair, Luca, right? Because Luca's like, say he's 204 pounds. He's just a little bit shorter than me, and like I'm 260. So Luca, I try to catch up to Luca's targets, and then Luca leaps past me again. I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ!
Ah, jerk.
Eventually, I put up 365 for 3, and mine are deep. Like, I've seen some people who they've been trying it, but they're actually kind of shallow. It's like, okay, no, guys, like there's a big difference here. You got to get them deep where your knee is nearly touching the ground. But Luke is impressive. I think he had like 335 for 5 or 6 or something.
Oh man, I might have to go. You know what? I think either today or tomorrow is a lower body day. I might have to step up my game. I haven't done it in a few weeks, so I might have to hit 335 for a 5 or something.
Go for it. My top ones are 365 for 3. That felt heavy as hell, and then
Yeah.
315 for 8 per leg, which that was tough, but it felt pretty good.
Yeah. All right.
Underlying principle here that anyone listening, they're like, what the fuck is Tony doing training one leg? His one leg is going to be huge, and the other leg is going to shrivel up and be nothing. But
I disagree with that, actually. I mean, I know you do too. So yeah, but I won't cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, I want to hear your thoughts. I wrote an article on this. Cross education and the neural innovation of the injured and immobilized limb actually is well researched. That will have preservative effects on muscle thickness and strength. But I'll let you take it a little.
Yeah, I mean, my mindset, my train of thought was what is the same. I've seen plenty of research that backs up if you train the healthy limb or the non-affected limb, there is going to be a neural carryover to the affected side, which then when you do start to re-implement normal training, you're probably going to see not as much of a regression in your strength, and not to mention atrophy, and you're going to probably bounce back a little bit quicker. But then at the other end of the spectrum, I'm like, well, what the fuck else am I going to do? Like, I want to train, like, there's a mental component here, like my own mental health.
Yep.
I'm just not going to train my left leg because I can't train my right. Like that's just a bunch of nonsense. So, and not to mention my bench has been going up. Like I'm an abysmally bad bench presser, which I'm fine with. Like I've accepted it. Nice. But my bench has seen a nice little bump in recent weeks, which trainable menu. Like, okay, I can't go to town with my squatting and deadlifting, but I can bench press, I can do chin-ups. But yeah, back to the single limb stuff. I really haven't noticed a ton of atrophy in my right leg. Yes, my calf is small. My right calf is smaller than my left, but certainly it's not super noticeable at all. I still have an ass. I still have a hamstring on that right side. And I know once I'm able to get back to normal training to my standard, that it probably won't take long for me to bounce back to my pre-injury numbers in terms of my deadlifting and squatting and stuff. So that's kind of the goal. Running and jumping is going to be another thing altogether. But considering, like, I mean, yes, I'm walking now, but even my gait is a little bit off. And with an Achilles injury, they say it's about a year where you're back to full strength and full capacity. And I think I'm approaching for the 4-month mark, and I'm pretty much on par where I'm supposed to be. I might be a little bit ahead of the curve because I was training fairly aggressively even when I was in my cast and in my boot. And I think people were kind of like, whoa, Tony, back up. Like, and I didn't feel at any point I was being an asshat. Like I wasn't doing anything so stupid where I felt I was going to injure myself or, I knew when to pull back when I had to, or if I had to. But yeah, I was being pretty aggressive with training my non-affected side and doing a lot of stuff with my knee bent on the bench. So I was doing rack pulls. I was doing heavy rack pulls at like over 400 pounds with like 3 weeks past my surgery. Doing hip thrusts and reverse hypers. I mean, I was doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you could do tons of reverse hypers. That wouldn't even matter.
Yeah, but a lot of it was just for my mental, for my mental health. Because I did have a few people reach out and be like, "No, aren't you scared that your left leg's gonna get bigger?" It's like, who cares if it did? Like,
the alternative is shrinks and gets that doesn't sound good. And you keep saying the mental health aspect, and that is profoundly important. A lot of people in our world, think about us in the industry who've been around a while and think, oh, these guys, they've got great lives, happiness, whatever. Maintaining our emotional well-being is still very crucial. You mentioned yourself, you have a therapist, your wife does it professionally. you know,
She is not my therapist, by the
you
way.
said that before.
that would not go well.
But there's something else in here too. I like to sort of call it momentum, training momentum, and it is really relevant to kind of what we've all dealt with COVID as well. And I was someone who was lucky through everything. I was able to, train clients in person in my basement the entire time, very carefully. There's going to be people who listen like, oh, you're not supposed to. Like, seriously, you take precautions and you're smart
Yep.
about it. And what that resulted in is everybody who participated in that kept their momentum and came flying out the gates, and their physical and emotional health was great. What's the alternative? The deterioration of your physical and emotional well-being, because of all this stuff. I don't think that's a really good approach. And what I've noticed is, while I had a surge of new people, the people who struggled, who weren't comfortable with or weren't able, for whatever reasons, maybe like vulnerable family members, who stopped during it all, they've had a really hard time restarting. And I think they've some of them have slipped into some mental health stuff just due to everything that's been going on. And keeping that training momentum has been really important for a lot of those people. It certainly mattered to me. I was working out the whole time myself, and going through that's a major injury, right? I mean, we're, as fitness professionals, our income is dependent on our ability to work. You suffer a major lower body injury like that, and that could theoretically, prevent. A friend of mine who works at the gym I'm at, he broke something in his knee. He really tore it up pretty bad, and he was not able to work. And he came back on crutches in a limited capacity, and it has emotionally affected him in a big way. So it can rob ourselves of our livelihood. So what are your thoughts on that, and continuing and getting through major disruptions in our ability to work, because you dealt with it concurrently in two different ways?
Yeah. It's a delicate balance, of course, because I tried really hard when COVID hit as my client's coach, to not be too pushy with working out training. So I think there was this initial push when COVID happened. I think you saw it too, where it's like, all right, we're all locked in, we're all in quarantine, so now everyone's gonna learn a new language, learn an instrument, write that novel, train, like get shredded because you got nothing to do to train. And that was a bunch of bullshit. I know me personally, and I'm just speaking for me, I wasn't hurt yet. I didn't get hurt until May. So from March until May, yes, I was training, but I wouldn't say my motivation to train was super high. I mean, yes, I went, but I was kind of like, all right, like, I understand that it isn't just about the physiological things I'm after, but more of the mental. It was important to me. But with my clients, I was very careful with just saying, what can I do to support you? What can I do to help? Obviously I'm shut down. Like I can't see anyone in person at my studio. But if you want me to help you devise an at-home workout based off the equipment you have available, let's do it. If not, then that's fine. Like, let's just do a weekly check-in, just to see how you're doing. Stuff like that. I felt it was important not to be pushy with, you have to train, like you have to keep up with it. Was I biased in thinking that was going to be important? Sure. But I felt it prudent to not overstep my bounds and pressure people into thinking that they had to keep up with their training or else. Because I don't think that was going to do anyone any favors, if that makes sense. I'm sure my wife could probably have a more articulate way of describing it, but that was where my headspace is at in terms of that. I'm similar, where when I was able to open back up, so last week of June, gyms in Massachusetts, particularly in Boston, were allowed to open up at a limited capacity. And I would say I had probably close to an 80% return rate, which is pretty darn good. But I had a smattering of clients who, for a variety of reasons, either they had a compromised a relative that they were around that they didn't want to risk getting sick, A couple, I have many healthcare professionals, doctors, that because I'm in Boston, it's a pretty well-renowned health industry city. Doctors who are, I mean, one of my clients is a pediatric neurosurgeon.
Wow.
So he really stupid individual. He's really dumb. But he was, I mean, of course he's like, I probably shouldn't come in just because of the demographic. Of course I understand. And he still hasn't come back, but he's doing at-home workouts, and I'm supporting him the best I can. Eventually, I feel like everyone's going to be back at some point. As it happens, last week, I reached out to two of my clients who originally were like, okay, I'm not ready to come back, whether it was like financial or because some people were afraid they're going to lose their jobs, and they just like they didn't have the passive revenue to pay for training, which of course I understand. And I sent an email out to two of my clients that, hey, just checking in. This is nothing but a check-in. Like, this isn't like, that's all it was. I just want to know how you're doing. And they wrote back saying, hey, I'm ready to come back. Like, let's set something up. And they came back last week. So I just found like the best approach, at least personally, is just not to be too pushy with it. And certain people are going to go at their own pace. And I respect that.
I think 90+% of all this stuff is still the long-term trust and relationship that we built with our clients anyway.
Sure.
So, I mean, yeah, what you do during, and, too much pressure on people when they're not ready. I mean, that makes no sense. But, most of the people are going to find their way back on their own, even without too much nudging. And I found
that. I mean, I'm sure it's the same way with your clients. Like we have a little bit of a self-selected client base, a little bit more proactive. They read our stuff on T Nation, or they've come across our blog, and they're just a little bit more, proactive is the best word I can come up with. And they don't need a ton of nudging as it is to keep up with their training. Like they miss deadlifting. They miss doing farmer carries. Like they want to do it. I think maybe with a lot of industry professionals in like a commercial gym setting, depending, might have a little bit more of an issue with that. But again, if you're taking the time as a coach and as a trainer to develop personal relationships, not like creepy personal relationships, of course, but like you have like the check-ins, and like you actually can have a conversation with your clients, and you have a rapport with them outside of just telling them how many sets and reps they have to do on an exercise. I think you're going to, I agree. Your retention rate is going to be pretty darn high. Comparatively speaking, if you're just someone who's just posting, selfies on Instagram, and taking that approach, then, that is what it is too. But
thing is something, so the company, I won't name them, but the company that Dean Somerset and I used to work for, during COVID, they, like a lot of gyms did, temporarily laid off a lot of their employees, but they also a legal warning that they were not allowed to be in contact with their clients.
Oh yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah.
While I understand that from a corporate point of view, I think that's kind of short-sighted because, I know of a number of their people, actually a lot of their trainers fled during and after the COVID thing.
Yep.
And I think maybe you're damned if you do, damned if you don't on that one, but you're directly interfering. When I was there, I mean, if I were still employed there, that would have been the final straw for me too. Thankfully, I left years ago. But I mean, most of my clientele were people I brought in by referral. So,
yep.
Got to tell me that, I don't have a relationship with these people. Go fuck yourself. I'm sorry. Whatever. But I mean, I left a long time ago for various reasons.
Man, I know who you're talking about, and that man, I have to say, like they don't get it.
Like, I'm sorry. I'm not going to say they haven't gotten it for a really long time, but Dean followed out a year after I did. Then a whole bunch of other people followed us out, and a lot of them are independent contractors under the same umbrella.
Part of me is like, I mean, part of me, yes, can understand the business. I get it. But also when we're in unprecedented times and you're dealing with it's just not just a monetary relationship here. And if you're approaching it that way, that it's just a transaction. That's all you mean to me. You're just a monthly transaction. Yeah, you're not going to keep that many clients. Like they're not going to come back, or they want to. I mean, it's like that old Mike Boyle famous quote: no one cares how much you know till they know how much you care. I mean, that's if that doesn't say it all, then I don't know what does.
Absolutely. I had a few other questions I wanted to dabble in, and I suppose this is probably a good place. You've been around. You said 2002, so
Yeah.
years. That's a fairly long career journey. You started out pretty young. What priorities have changed across your career? I mean, obviously one of them is going to be family, because you have a young family. But is there anything that matters to you now you never even imagined, or stuff that mattered to you early in your career you look back at and you're just laughing at yourself for caring about that stuff?
Man, I'm so not a reflective person, which I know sounds very weird given that I'm married to a psychologist. I would say stuff that hasn't changed is I'm always striving to be or get better in terms of continuing. Yeah, like I've never been the type of coach who feels like he's figured everything out and I don't need to learn anymore. And I have come across colleagues who do feel that way. I remember when I first moved to Boston, and my first job in Boston was at a pretty high level commercial gym. And we're talking, I was one of like 70 trainers. It's just massive. And I remember having a conversation with one of the other trainers. He was like this guy who always had like his Kendall anatomy book. He was that guy. And which is cool. Like, all right, you're an anatomy nerd. That's awesome. But then I remember having a conversation with him about like an article or a book or whatever. He's like, like I already know what I need to know. I don't bother myself with learning other stuff. I mean, I'm kind of paraphrasing to a degree, but he basically said like, I already know it all. And I'm like, man, I never want to be that way. I don't feel that's a smart, wise decision to be in this industry and think that you know it all.
Common thing in commercial gym settings. I worked with a few people in the past who sort of had that attitude, but I also found those people tend to be looking long-term outside of the industry.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point.
I went on to become a firefighter, and he's got a good education training, and his clients loved him, world-class personality, but I know there wasn't much of an interest or investing in anything beyond where he had achieved.
Yep.
And he did a good job, but he wanted to grow beyond it. I think once you get into private settings, you're seeing people who are relentlessly pursuing education. I think that's also, like you said, self-selecting, where the people that we're exposed to, the people that come to your seminars, are that type of person. I mean, like literally anyone who's come to your seminar is someone who's made that commitment. You're just not getting coaches who decided, hey, I know everything I need to know.
Yeah, and I also think it's kind of like I view it as a responsibility on my end too. Like I know I'm not cheap, and for me to justify my prices, I feel like part of that is, well, it pays what I charge kind of helps pay for continuing ed. Like allows me to travel and yes, present and teach myself, which I think you would agree, even if you are the presenter and you're doing a 1 or 2 day workshop, you're still learning quite a bit when you're doing that. Like there's been numerous times where I've learned many tidbits from attendees of workshops, but certainly going to attend conferences and workshops too is important. I view that as a responsibility, just to stay relevant and stay on top of my game. And I'm kind of I've said numerous times that I hate reading research. I'm not good at it. I think that is a skill set in of itself. But I have memberships to numerous research reviews. Again, I just view it as a responsibility that throughout my career, I've always placed a pretty high standard on maintaining that mindset, that I will never not want to get better or improve myself or to feel like I figured it all out. And I think people appreciate that. Like, I am not scared to say, there's 3 words I feel like the industry is scared to say, I don't know. uh, that happens a lot. I don't know why that is. It might just be human nature in general, but I see it a lot in the health and fitness industry. Like, people are scared to say, I don't know. And I am not scared to say that.
You're afraid to be vulnerable, to admit that
Yeah.
you don't have all the answers, right?
And, there's been times where clients have asked me a question and or something that they've read and they bring it up to me. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, let me look into it. Like, I'll read it myself, or, thankfully I have many friends in the industry who are smarter than I, and I can ask them their opinion and I can always get the answer. So, that's another quality that I felt I've carried with me from early in my career, that I'm not ashamed or abashed to say I don't know to something. So I think, yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
I was gonna say, I think it's worth pointing out too, anyone listening, if they're like, oh shoot, I've got to go and read research. People, you're a good example, but you certainly take people like, I know Sohee Lee, Dr. Mike Israetel, the list goes on and on and on of people who are spending a lot more time diving into peer-reviewed research. You're following those people because they're taking that research and they're turning it into something that's accessible for you. So no, you don't need to go in to read the stuff. Being able to can be useful at times. I don't tend to read a lot of research. I've gotten into a little bit when I'm writing the article on cross-education. I had to read a whole bunch of peer-reviewed research because I really needed to know what the fuck I was talking about. I knew it existed. I just had to dive in. And I wrote an article a while back that you shared in your newsletter. I got a lot of reads, by the way, off of that, about sleep. And that required a lot of digging into research stuff. So
yeah, that was a deep one. Yeah, that sure, with an article like that needs research. And yeah, I agree. Like, I don't feel like you need to spend your Friday nights reading research to be relevant in the industry. I think you need to like be familiar with it, and like again, that's why I love research reviews like examine.com, Stronger by Science, Breck and Charles that has a research review. I subscribe to all of those, and they're relatively, they're pretty cheap considering. I feel like, what was that?
Mass,
yes, sorry.
Does Greg have something? Greg Knuckles puts out a ton of stuff through Stronger by Science. Mass is what him and Eric Helms. And
yep.
Yep.
Mike Zurdo. Oh man, I feel bad. There we go. Yeah.
Smart guys.
But yeah, they do a wonderful job. And for return on investment, we're talking $10 a month, or something along those lines.
Weightology is another fantastic one.
Okay. So
stuff. These are some good ones.
Yeah, and then so I just think it from a time efficiency standpoint, it makes more sense for me to read other people's, granted their interpretation in some ways of the research, but they're all smart individuals, so I kind of trust their expertise on that. So that helps tremendously. Yeah. What was that, Andrew? What was that?
We're doomed if we can't trust Greg Knuckles and James Krieger and Eric.
Yeah, exactly.
Through what the research says.
Yeah. And I think to flip the conversation in terms of stuff that I, didn't do early in my career that I feel like has been more relevant as I've gotten older, it's certainly the financial savviness. That is something that early in my career I didn't think at all about in terms of retirement, like preparing for taxes or even like thinking about that. And this is not to say I did not pay my taxes. I'm just saying my organization of like preparing for those each year was pretty piss poor back then. Now I have all these systems in place that I use, and being able to like put in money to my SEP IRA and having retirement, and and then just having money to be able to live a life and like save for a car or a house or whatever. That stuff I did not do early in my career, which I wish I did. You always see people do the math. Well, if you started 5 years earlier, you'd have this much now. It's like, oh, damn it. I did not do that early in my career. So And actually, I honestly, I didn't really start really doing it until I left CSP, Cressy Sports Performance. When I started my own studio, then I started getting like, okay, now I need to be a little bit more in tune with finances and what the hell I'm doing. So that would be something early in my career I wish I paid a little bit more attention to.
I know Chad Landers and James Krieger now are doing a project when it comes to, I can't remember the exact title of it, but it's Fit Pro Financial Services or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Everybody's,
smart.
stuff and going, ah, shit. Well, another thing, go read Ramit Sethi's book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich.
Yep, that's a good one. Yep.
And then, yeah, go and check out what James and Chad are doing. And at least that way you have a plug-in that resources out there. If that's something like, shit, I'm not doing these things, cool. We just gave you something to go and follow up on, and then you're covered, right? Versus just talking.
Yeah. Yeah, another one I would highly recommend is Profit First.
Right.
I always forget the author's name, but
Michalowicz or whatever.
yeah, excellent. I mean, that is the system I use, and it works like gangbusters in terms of just simplicity. I know where my money's going each month, and it's a really, really nice system.
I can't say listening to his voice on audio, his books. He is my least favorite.
Oh yeah, okay. He was the keynote speaker at a conference I spoke at a few years in Chicago. Ironically, I didn't go to it because I was elsewhere at the time, but yeah, I actually, so I didn't hear him talk, so I wouldn't know.
Horrible. I read other books, and so I actually had this debate on here, if anyone remembers, with Andy McCoy, sorry, and Andy uses Profit First too and swears by it and thinks it's the greatest thing in the universe. And so, but I just found this guy really needs to get someone else to read his audiobooks. And he had like The Pumpkin Plan was another one of his books. It's like, this motherfucker.
Oh yeah,
to listen to. I just, sorry, I had bluntness. If an audio narrator is really annoying,
it's tough. Yeah, it's tough. I can appreciate that. There's been,
I understand, and Andy was the one who sort of convinced me that there's a lot of value behind it. So I think that recommendation is worthwhile for anybody who's thinking about this stuff. So I guess here's another thing embedded in all this stuff too, is that 18 years ago you started out in the industry, and somewhere along the way, building a brand and being something more than just a commercial setting trainer mattered to you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there can you remember why that mattered, or was there a certain point you decided, hey, I want to write articles, I want to be a speaker presenter, I want to build a reputation in this industry, versus just heads down, work with your clientele? Why was it important?
So that's actually a really good question. I can't say there was any point in time or any impetus early in my career that made me think like, hey, I should have a brand, and like I should venture out and like see what I can do. Like that never really entered my mind. I just viewed it as a natural progression in my career. The first 5 years of my career, I was doing corporate fitness, commercial gym trainer, and it wasn't until like year 4 or 5 that I started venturing into writing articles and writing a blog. Starting to do the Fitcast, which is like the first fitness podcast ever, really. And then eventually that progressed to being asked to present. And that, oh my God, that you want to talk about a story of my wife. I attribute my wife. I might've said the story before. I don't know if it was with you, but like the first time I was asked to present, was 2009, or maybe 2010, but 2009, 2010. My wife was an adjunct professor at a college here in Boston. Her colleague wanted me to come in to speak to the incoming freshman class on like nutritional strategies in the cafeteria. And I told her bluntly, like, listen, I'm not a nutritionist. Like, but I mean, I know stuff, and I certainly have an idea or two on like just strategies kids could use to eat a healthier, make better meal choices or whatever. And I remember the night of my presentation, the morning of actually, I woke up at like 2 a.m. in a panic, like sweating, like woke my girlfriend, now wife, up, and she's like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "I can't do it. I'm gonna call in sick. I can't do it." I was just really, really, really nervous. And this was probably going to be speaking in front of like 300-400 people. Not a major crowd, but pretty big. And but she talked me through it. Like, she's like, "What's the worst that could happen? If this happened, then do you think this will happen?" And like, she was just talking me through it. Long story short, I did show up. I did do it. I didn't suck too bad. And and Lisa, my wife, I remember after the fact, it came up in conversation maybe a few months later, maybe a year later, when I was doing more presenting, because we were like, "Wow, man, I'm doing all these workshops and presenting now." And I was like, "Remember when I almost didn't want to do that one?" And she's like, "Yeah, like I knew that if you didn't do it, you would never have done it." And so it was so important that was such a crucial thing. Like, she's 100% right. Like, if I ended up not doing that one presentation, the likelihood that I would be doing what I do now in terms of like traveling the world and presenting in front of it's a big portion of my income actually now, that might never have happened. I don't know where I was going with that whole beginning of the story, but as far as brand, it's always been to me a natural just progression of my career in terms of, what are other ways I can generate passive income or another revenue stream. Because I think in the long run, the big umbrella theme for me is like, do I really feel like I'm going to be coaching people in person when I'm 65, 70 years old? Maybe. I mean, I have no idea. That's still a ways away. There's got to be other ways for me to generate income or develop passive streams of revenue that will help me be able to make a living, but also prepare for retirement. And to me, that was presenting, coming up with digital products, writing programs, writing in general. So that's kind of how I approached it. And then the brand just kind of like sort of happened. Like, I've never, you know me, Andrew, I'm not a very outlandish person. Like, I'm like, yes, I'm Tony Gentilcore, but until like, yeah, I'm Tony Gentilcore, that's my brand. Like, I've never been that type of individual. What was that?
It doesn't feel curated, like there's been, and this sort of led to something else. So I'll actually sort of throw it out there and you can incorporate it into the conversation as much as you want. But you came in a generation that was before, certainly Instagram, right? And before social media was as powerful as it is. So I think a lot of the people coming in now, social media, and I'm pro social media. I think use it, understand how it works, compete for eyeballs against the skeezier influencer types in our world instead of complaining about them. But there's also much more effort to curate image and show the world a certain thing amongst this newer generation of fitness professional. Whereas I've never felt that yours has been, and I'm not saying curating is a bad thing, it can be, but yours doesn't come off as being, "Oh shit, I took 50 selfies and I chose the best one to post."
Sure.
And you got those little rings in your eyes because you've got that ring light behind or any of that sort of stuff. You probably don't know.
No, that's never been my MO at all. And I think as it happens, like, I think I saw Brett put up a good post either yesterday or 2 days ago on Instagram, telling the story of two different influencers, so to speak. One had, a couple 100,000 followers, but really struggling to make any money because all this individual is doing is posting selfie pictures and scantily clad pictures. And then the other person, who was actually putting up relevant content, and putting up instructional videos, but far less followers. Like, we're talking 10,000 followers compared to 150,000 followers. And the person with 10,000 was like making 6 figures a year and like doing really well. Whereas the one with a couple 100,000 followers was struggling to, sell 10 shirts or whatever. I don't know. But, so I will always say that, quality content and it will matter, and that certainly is subjective in terms of like what constitutes quality content, but I think we all know it when we see it. Like you could tell somebody who knows what they're talking about and they're putting up exercise progressions of a dead bug, or why the dead bug is important, here's progressions, and or breaking down nutritional strategies and like some or debunking myths, compared to somebody who's just putting up a cool looking exercise in minimal clothing just for the sake of that. Like that, there's a big stark difference there.
Two quick thoughts. First of all, the girl that Brett had posted up, he said in the post that she had like 5,500 followers, whatever.
Okay.
Unless he put her in the post, she now has 18,000. So,
well, yeah, I think you even mentioned how it's like, oh, well, now she got a bump because you mentioned her. Yeah,
there, right? Like it got like 11, but I commented. Now I just looked and it's 18. So
not too bad. So now she has a swipe up function thanks to Brett.
Yeah. And so that's the power of Brett's engaged audience. But I've had this conversation with a couple of my pals who follow me on Instagram, and they're ripped, shredded guys, and they've lamented the fact that if they put up a jacked shirtless photo, you get tons of likes, the metrics all go off like crazy. But they're really interested in sharing the kind of stuff that I think you and I are more known for, and the people that were swimming in the same sort of circles. And they've noticed that they're not getting a lot of engagement, a lot of shares. Well, it's in part because of the type of follower that their work has built up over time. And it's a shallow type of follower that will click like on a shirtless selfie, but doesn't necessarily read the caption or engage in a deeper level. So I've enjoyed, I've been building my social media aggressively for the space of time that I've been trying to invest in it. And one of my goals is, hey, I actually do want to totally get to that 10,000 follower mark, because I started really late in the game on Instagram, and it's been fucking fun as hell. I've been loving it. And anything I post up for the most part is crazy engaged, crazy shared. I keep getting followers all the time. And like Brett's point, absolutely, like the type of follower, the type of stuff you're putting up really does matter. So, for anyone who's trying to build that following, yes, it does take consistency, hard work. You got to have a really great message. But I'm hesitant to encourage anyone to take any real shortcuts with it either, because you're not at the same level of engagement. Or
it's a job. It's really, it's kind of, sometimes I get, I will be the first. I'm not remotely aggressive on Instagram. There's people out there. Megan wrote about it before. I know Brett has, how you frame the film and like the angle and how you look. It's all relevant. And then we can start talking about adding graphics and not to mention the caption. Is that engaging? And it's like a second job trying to keep up with that stuff, and it can be exhausting.
I've noticed too, and I put up a lot of ideas, and I just literally post them to Twitter. I chop out the image and I throw it up on Instagram, and those get shared like crazy. They drive.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. Like when you just take a tweet and just put that up as a caption, those get a lot of engagement. Yeah,
tons of engagement. And again, what's key there is there's two keys. One is the quality and what you're saying, right? You got to practice that, come up with your best thoughts, share them. Two, it's the human desire for familiarity. You can go into music and how familiar sounding, all songs are structured very similarly, and there's a very predictable almost algorithm to what music will be hit versus what isn't, because humans like familiar patterns. Story writing, the Joseph Campbell, Hero's Journey, the stuff that Star Wars, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings are all the same fucking story when you boil down to it. So what I've noticed is a lot of fitness professionals who are trying to get themselves out there, they're taking that sort of idea behind the Twitter thing, but they're making their images, they're altering it in some way. They're making it really busy. I was actually talking to my buddy PJ Street, and we had a big chat about this, and he had a whole bunch of stuff all over this image, and I tried to, it's actually, I think it would actually look better and be more engaging if it wasn't quite as busy, and he actually agreed with me. And I've seen people, I think you met Kieran Marsalis when you were up here, right, Kieran?
Yes.
Yeah, he's a goofy, fun, brilliant little dude. He's always got that sword. So all he did was put a sword graphic through his picture, and everything else was the same tweet thing. And I was like, I like that because it's simple. It's one little thing that's unique to you, but it's not busy and it works. Whereas I've seen other people clutter it up or alter it in some way. I've seen people actually put a fake blue check mark on theirs, which I
Really?
actually looks awful. That looks
Oh man.
dreadful. That's so cheesy and
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. I didn't realize people do that. I mean, I've gotten an influx of
Seen it twice.
I've had an influx of people messaging me on Instagram about how to get the blue check that I just delete.
Yeah.
Like basically I don't even know how it works. Like they're saying, it seems like they're insinuating that you buy the blue check. But I don't know. I have no idea what the hell. I just delete them anyways. I don't even read them.
My
But
buddy CFL, he's got like 1,000 followers, like Canadian Football League, and yeah, he's got a blue check mark. I was
I think I think that goes without saying. If you're a professional athlete, actress, whatever, but you know, in the fitness industry, I would imagine it probably comes down to you know, books you've written. I have no idea how. I mean, but I really don't care. Like, I could get two shits if I have a little blue check mark next to my name.
You Tony Gentilcore with your name. It's like Jesus, right? I've actually got an Andrew Coates who follows me, found me on T Nation. Every once in a while, he'll just like comment on my Facebook or like shoot me a message or whatever. It's just kind of a funny thing. And it gets confusing if people see us talking to each other, like, what the fuck's going on?
Yeah, I have there's another Tony Gentilcore who's actually a computer programmer. I think he used to be involved with Firefox. But yeah, he and I have corresponded a few times, just kind of a surreal thing, because I'm not a common name at all. Andrew Coates isn't either, but mine even more so. So it's always kind of a kick out of it.
There's a guy in the industry, sort of an internet pal. His name is Chris Vrooman. And I mean, he's a trainer, reputable guy, whatever. And then there's also a keto Chris Rubin, like a guy, a nutritionist with a keto brand. So that's kind of a tricky one to deal with.
Oh man, yeah, but it's social media, Instagram, social media in general. It's definitely a second job. You know, but I agree with you. I think we fitness professionals definitely should lean into that shit. Like, it is a way of engaging, and especially you got to be engaging with your audience. Like, it makes zero sense to me to spend all this time putting out great content and then not interacting with your audience if they ask questions or when they ask questions. And you know, I try to comment on most comments, even if, you know, I don't know if you've gotten, but even if you like, I've gotten messages from people who are like dumbfounded that I'll like a post that they like, I can't believe you liked it or responded to it. It's like I'm not that big of a deal that I can't answer a question or say thank you. Like, it's no big deal. No,
you're making too big a deal to respond to.
Yeah. So I think that's often a missed component of social media engagement too, is actually engaging with your audience.
Me and Jordan Sire were talking about this recently. Like, Jordan's got 600,000 plus followers. You know, if you share somebody's post, they actually don't get notified. You've got to like put in their @name. So I actually always tell people, like, hey, tag me, because I want to be able to say thank you. If someone shares something that I posted and they've tagged me, I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to,
of course, yeah.
And I'll never get tired of it. Jordan never gets tired of it. We appreciate it. So don't be afraid that, and I've had people message me like, oh, you know, I was afraid I'm being annoying. I'm like, fuck no. Like, share that.
Not at all.
This is how people follow my work. You know, and I want to be able to say thank you. Like, if someone's that engaged, they like what you're doing that much, and they're actually, quote, a fan, like, holy shit. Yeah, that is the coolest feeling in the world. So by all means, and don't be afraid to do that. Shit, I had another thought there too. Oh, I know what it was. So one of the posts that got the most engagement I've ever had was the one that you kind of copied, where I took a new photo. I was encouraged. I had to get rid of the striated belts, like Jack looking photo that I've been using for so long. It's still up on my T Nation bio. I think it suits that a bit more. But it was a more accessible, less intimidating sort of photo, because that's also not my audience. Outside of the T Nation writing, my audience and my clientele is not like Jack bros who want to muscle mass. I don't train bodybuilders. It's not my thing. So a couple of friends suggested, hey, you need to change. So I had a friend of mine take some photos, and it came out really well. And then I just wrote this post, like a whole bunch of just little pieces about me that people didn't even know.
Oh yeah, that's right, yeah.
Derek Stanley loved it, so he did the same thing, and then you went and turned around and did the same thing, and that actually got a ton of engagement. And that's just being a real person. That's not curated. That's just actually sharing a bit more of yourself. And that's why.
Yeah, I think and that kind of goes into the rapport I was talking about earlier. People want to be able to relate to you, that you're not just a deadlifting Terminator, or that you're not just talking about like anatomy of hip flexion, or how to improve scapular upward rotation, like that they can relate to you in some other capacity, whether it be, a show you're watching, or I think a lot of what was popular about you writing your about me post, or random facts post at mine, is there's a lot of my past that people don't know about, like my competitive baseball, kind of joking about that, and playing in the collegiate level, and there's just stuff I brought up that was a nice memory lane transition for me, but then a lot of people that didn't know about me either, which was and not to mention, it was just I was in a writing rut at the time, and what better way to get out of it than to write about yourself? So it was a home run in many ways.
Yeah, if you're interested in writing, I mean, again, you're widely recognized as being a very good writer. Your writing is very accessible. And I'm recently just been reading, I like books on writing, so I've been reading Bird by Bird by Anna.
Yeah, great book. Yeah, great book.
And it seems like every third chapter is kind of not about so much writing directly, but she just goes into, hey, just like start thinking about how you grew up or stuff about your life, and just start writing.
Mm-hmm.
And you never know where it's going to lead to where you get something that's really usable. And it may not be usable right now, it may be usable later. And yeah, you and I ended up writing something that turned out to be very, very engaging and popular with our followings.
Yeah.
That just shared a bit more about stuff that people otherwise didn't know. I mean, I'm trying to remember all the stuff I included in there. There's probably stuff I missed out on, but it's like I used to be a martini bar owner back in my mid-20s in St. John's, Newfoundland, right? I grew up in a town of 500 people. My high school graduating class was 9. There's all this sort of stuff that people couldn't even believe about, any number of people in the industry. Once you peel back the layers, there's a lot more than just a quote curated social media image.
Yeah. You beat me. Like I thought I was tiny. My graduating class was 55. So, which is tiny, but then when you compare it to 9, that's nuts.
My hometown, when I was 4 till I was 17, then I moved into St. John's, Newfoundland to go to university. My whole family came in at the same time. Dad pivoted into businesses he was involved in. And my hometown was smaller than most people's high school graduating classes.
Yeah.
Put that in perspective, right? And this is also pre-internet. So the world was a lot, I guess, bigger in that sense, but like the world that I was contained within was a lot smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Drive 4 hours just to go and buy CDs in a store.
Oh man.
And we had Columbia House, so we were able to order the CDs, and we got the Christmas wish book. So the Sears catalog was the big exciting thing when we were kids.
Oh yeah. Where you circle like, everything. Yeah.
3/24, like holy shit, right? Did you walk 2 hours to school each way? Both ways are uphill, carrying whatever. That was my dad's life, but we did walk to school a fair distance in this rural town.
Yeah, I mean, so you're right though. People, there's no secret why that's engaging. People wanna. It just goes back. They want to be able to relate to you. That you're not just. Yes, the fitness portion is important. I think most people who read our stuff is because of that. It's not because of our upbringing, so to speak. But if there's some little like thing that they can relate to you on. Whether it is coming up in a very rural area, or playing baseball growing up, or, being obsessed with Goodfellas. I think that's, you're only going to, get more people into your circle, so to speak. They tend to stick around a little bit longer when they know they can relate to you in other capacities.
When I first watched Goodfellas, I went on a big Ray Liotta kick, and I pretty much watched every Ray Liotta.
Yeah.
Fine, I remember that.
Unlawful Entry.
Yeah, pretty sure that was in Identity. There's a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah. It's kind of weird he didn't become a bigger deal. He did Field of Dreams, and I think when Goodfellas, Field of Dreams, or maybe vice versa. But yeah, like he never. I know he became a well-known actor, but he didn't become like a huge deal.
Mister. The thing I loved him in the most was voicing the lead character in Grand Theft Auto Vice City.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
So he's the voice of that. The Grand Theft Auto 3, your character doesn't talk, so he's the first protagonist that actually talks. I think it's Tommy Vercetti, I think was his name. So Leota did that masterfully. Something to your point about engagement. So I post up a lot about my history growing up on things like I love Witcher 3, the Witcher series, or RPGs, or Dungeons and Dragons, or Lord of the Rings, that sort of stuff, and that gets a ton. And I probably get more messages about when I post my cat Ozzy in my story than anything to do with it. There's all these women who follow and they just love Ozzy, right? Couldn't give a damn about me, but Ozzy's like the star of the show, and I even got a message last night about that. So, but he's part of my life too, and he's a lot of fun, and people love fluffy cats. So, what game on?
Yeah. I mean, I've posted many pictures of Dagny, my cat, and then people loved Pop Up Julian. When lightsaber battles with Julian in the hallway, like they love that stuff. Yeah.
And you're legendary.
So and I've learned with Instagram too. I think I learned it from Craig Ballantyne. How to use your feed compared to stories. Like in your main feed, it should be the meat and potatoes of your content, of course. But I mean, you can kind of toss in little anecdotes of your personal life, a cute picture of your cat, or I post hallway lightsaber battles with my kid, but stories is kind of where that stuff should live. Certainly that's where we're using the swipe up feature to like articles and products and stuff we like.
I don't have that yet. I'm working on it.
But that's what you'll use it for. But stories too, is where I post pictures of a dinner sometimes. Like I tend to think most people in the feed could really care less like what you eat for dinner, unless you're like a meal prep account or something. I don't know, but stories is kind of like where your personal life is, and the feed is more of where your actual content is. And I remember listening to Craig Ballantyne speak about that out in California a few years ago. Where it's like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like to kind of approach it that way.
So I'm almost out of time, but I want to make sure everybody listening knows where to find you. I'm actually going to drop this episode tomorrow morning. So
oh man, quick turnover.
Yeah, I was supposed to record Sam Spinelli this week, but Sam had something come up, so he's now midweek. So I flip-flop your guys' order. So anyone listening, you get Sam next week. But let's make sure everybody knows where to find you since we're talking about your social media.
Yeah, it will be TonyGentilcore.com. So that's my website, and that's my blog and social media and podcasts I've appeared on. Everything is right there. So that would be where the easiest spot to find me.
I definitely recommend getting on your email list. I've been on there before.
Yep.
I am as I get your weekly emails, but you also feature one of my articles on there and shared it through, which got a lot of traction. So I appreciate that. That was actually really cool. And I know that you share a lot of other people's stuff in the industry.
Yep.
Who is it? Was it Alex McBriarty? Did you?
Oh yeah, I just saw that his guest post on my site last week was I think it made article of the week on Personal Trainer Development Center. So that was kind of cool. Totally. I didn't even know that until Shane McLean let me know that happened. So yeah.
Both guys. Shane is a great guy. Shane is a guy who's writing a lot of stuff of his own, but he's really engaged with the stuff the other writers are doing in the industry, and he's one of the selection committee for all the stuff that goes on the Personal Trainer Development Center's weekly list. So Shane's an awesome dude.
Yeah.
And Alex I've met through my travels. He's a really great guy.
I've not met him. I don't think we've crossed paths, but yeah, he reached out to me, and he actually did a non-douchey approach to getting a guest post on my site, where he's like, he, not that he had to like, talk me up at all, but it wasn't like, hey, I want to write for your site. It was like a nice little introduction, and like, here's, I read this post that you had. I feel like I can elaborate on that topic a little bit more in this fashion. And so I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then he wrote his guest post. I put it up, and yeah, and I'm sure it's getting more traction for him. That was on the Personal Trainer Development site. So I'm very happy for him for that.
He's a great guy, and he's part of that.
Seems it, yeah.
Generation of trainers who are working hard to get a little bit more attention, get their names out there a bit more, and people like that, if you're listening, if you feel like you're in that category, a lot of my social media stuff openly encourage you guys to just work really hard, continue,
Yeah.
and do exactly what Alex did in tactfully build relationships with not just the industry leaders, because guys like you, Tony, you do get inundated with a lot of stuff, but treat you guys like a real person, but also foster relationships with the people who are where you currently are as well, because those people are growing and blowing up in the industry. And everybody who is now a leader, we talk about guys like Luca or whoever, they all started out humble beginnings somewhere, and they all had pals on the way up through. So, I mean, you look at where you and Dean Somerset and Eric Cressy and Pete Dupuis all started out,
Yeah.
where you guys all are now, and you guys all came up together in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's always I always say it's always half luck, half like hard work. But certainly no one does it on their own. I'm fully aware that I've been able to surround myself with a lot of high quality individuals in the industry that have helped boost me up as well. So, and I know there's a new batch of trainers that are doing the same thing. So, it's always nice to see.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and chat with me.
Yeah, always.
I think I'll dump all this stuff, all the links and graphic. Don't do the old graphics where Guido put someone's face on a movie anymore.
That was always so good. Yeah.
It was one of those things like, let's retire.
Probably a little time consuming too. I don't know.
No, not at all. Honestly, we just had to think of something that he quite literally just took someone's face, splashed on it. It was deliberately crude and rough, and yet profoundly popular and very distinctly branded. But
yeah,
I pivoted away from that when I changed the name and changed the whole format. But yeah, I'll get you all that stuff. And
yeah, great. Let me know now. Once it goes up. You said tomorrow. Let me know, and then I'll put it up myself.
Beautiful. And then for everyone listening, if you found this for the first time through Tony's feed, dropped a few names of people like Luca and our other friends, Pete Dupuis. They've all done the podcast before, at least in its old form, and I'll have those guys back and more. So check out some of the other stuff in the library, and I'd love it if you end up being a regular listener. I'll keep bringing on great guests to earn that. And reviews, 5-star reviews are always great. Those are helpful. And if you are a regular listener, but yet not following my social media, I've been far more engaged, especially on my Instagram. So I would love it if you, A, throw me a follow, and B, shoot me a message. I want to connect with you, and I want to chat with you and hear your thoughts on why you've been tuning into the podcast. Thanks, Tony. Have a great rest of your day. And I've got to run off and coach some clients.
Me too. I'll see you later, Andrew.
Take care. Bye.
Take care.